The 1920s, 30s, and 40s were a tumultuous time in terms of economy and culture in the United States. The Roaring Twenties marked a decade of technological advancements and mass production, leading to a period of economic prosperity for many. The 30s, however, were a time of severe economic hardship, and the Great Depression has since been associated with unemployment and industrial decline. Then, as European tensions rose and World War II began, the United States economy once again took a turn as industry increased and the employment rate rose as the whole nation became involved in the war effort. One commonality through these years, however, was leisure. Leisure took various forms through these three time periods as resources such as time and money became available and have benefited and influenced the leisure that we participate in today. While specific leisure activities rose and fell in popularity throughout the years, they all left their mark on American society and have influenced the way leisure today is viewed and practiced.
The 20s represented a time of economic prosperity because of the increased ability to mass-produce goods. Mass production was an important characteristic during this time period because it meant that goods that were not previously available to the lower and middle classes were now accessible to them. The increase of attendance to sporting events and the growth of popularity in social life is largely contributed to due to the ability for people to access more.
Although the radio was first invented in 1895, it started gaining popularity in the 1920s as a main form of broadcasting. The radio was a product of the mass market, selling radios to more than 60% of the population between the years of 1923 and 1930. Communities were unified as families and friends came together to listen to radio programs. The program provided information to people about events happening in America and around the world.
This is my favorite part coming up. I love that. That's the best part of this song. Man. That's what I think.
Professional sports flourished in the 1920s, particularly baseball, but also football as people searched for heroes in society. Professional football began in the 1920s with big-name players such as Harold Grange. Babe Ruth helped baseball regain its popularity in the 20s after the Black Sox scandal of 1919. Babe Ruth helped to transform the game into a game of the home run hitter after he hit 59 in 1921 and then 60 in 1927. These big personalities helped to draw huge crowds to the games. Movies were the most significant new instrument of mass entertainment in this era. From 1920 to 1929, movie attendance went from 50 million to 90 million a week. In the 1920s, the movie industry relocated from New York to Hollywood and released around 700 movies a year. They subsequently captured 95% of the British market and 70% of the French market. Movies increased their popularity by featuring glamour, sophistication, and sex appeal. New genres also appeared as adventures, sex comedies, and tales of youth debuted. Movies also created popular culture by promoting common speech, dress, behavior, and heroes. Movies also reinforced racial stereotypes by denigrating minorities. Between 1922 and 1927, Hollywood began producing movies in color and with sound, which made movies even more entertaining.
Speakeasies arose from Prohibition and gave rise to nightclubs as we know them today. Bootleggers smuggled, produced, and sold alcoholic beverages to speakeasies. Prohibition gave opportunities to many people to get lucrative jobs, although those jobs were illegal and came with much risk, but provided great rewards financially. Prohibition also gave rise to gangs and prominent criminals such as Al Capone.
Due to the economic collapse of 1929, known now as the Great Depression, many Americans found themselves without jobs. This normally working class of individuals now had an abundant amount of free time, and although the times were tough, people still came up with ways to have fun. Some people experienced forced leisure due to unemployment, which meant that they did not have a choice but to fill their time with activities traditionally considered leisure. People participated in activities that were free or of little cost, such as reading newspapers and books, listening to the radio, and attending dances. People used the time during their leisure to help them escape from the realities of the Great Depression.
Hey, let's go.
On March 12, 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt gave his first fireside chat, addressing the banking situation in the United States with the hope to inspire confidence and ease the fears of the American people.
Of the United States. My friends, I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking. To talk with the comparatively few who understand the mechanics of banking, but more particularly with the overwhelming majority of you who use
During the Great Depression, the radio grew in popularity as more families had access to it. The radio continued to grow throughout this time period because of the large amount of information it provided compared to its competitors. Radios were expensive to buy, but once one was obtained, provided a free source of entertainment. Therefore, not everyone could afford their own, so people came together to listen when there was a radio source in the community. The number of listeners continued to grow as the radio improved in quality of the stations and increased the number of programs. Radio networks provided listeners with choices such as sports, news, comedies, dramas, and music. The Great Depression time period provided a time for music and dance to gain popularity because of the cheap form of entertainment it provided. Swing music was popular during this time period and was a form of jazz that was less improvisational and included written arrangements, emphasized solos, and included danceable rhythms.
During the Great Depression, people found ways to have fun and sometimes even made their own ways to entertain themselves. Families would participate in leisure with friends, neighbors, and other relatives by getting together and playing games. People played card games, such as whist, pinchole, canasta, and bridge, as well as board games, such as Monopoly and Scrabble. In 1935, Monopoly was mass-marketed by Parker Brothers, and by 1937, about 6 million games had been sold. Similarly, puzzles could be marketed very easily because they could be mass-produced through die cutting. Before this, puzzles and games were expensive, and thus were not accessible to most people.
During the Great Depression, sports offered an escape from reality, and the increase in sporting events and athletes was influenced by the advances in technology, such as the radio, the changes in the game rules, and people's growing interest to personally identify with teams and athletes. Baseball, football, basketball, golf, tennis, and boxing were broadcast over the radio. In college football, there were game changes that encouraged more passing and a slimmer football, which made games more unpredictable and exciting. The growth of college football during this time period led to the formation of more bowl games, which brought on more public attention.
Much of the leisure during the World War II time period was focused on children. This is the case because the men were overseas fighting in the war, and women were beginning to take a more prominent role in the home front by taking many of the jobs that the men at war had previously been operating. Children during this time period that were too young to go fight dominated leisure. However, there was still leisure for adults. There were many activities for children to participate in, such as games, sports, and radio.
7, 8, 9, 10.
Child games were of the top activities for children to take part in during this time of war. With the men overseas fighting in the war, the women began to start working outside of the home. Because of this, leisure activities were very common for children in this time period. Checkers, shooting marbles, playing Monopoly, and tag were all very common games for children to participate in. One game in particular combined imagination and creativity. That game was Kick the Can. Kick the Can involves a big space with lots of hiding places, typically a backyard or a park, where multiple players can be involved. One player, who is deemed as it, has an empty can at their feet. They close their eyes and count to a number as the children run off and hide. The player, who is it, leaves the can and tries to go find someone who is hiding. Once they have spotted the hider, they both race to see who can kick the can first. If the player who kicks the can before the hider is sent to jail, and if the hider kicks the can first, all the people in jail are set free. Sports were also very common for kids during the World War II time period. Boxing, horse racing, baseball, and college football were among the most popular sports in the World War II era. Baseball was one of the easier sports to participate in as a child because it was typically played in the streets, yards, or parks, really any place that had an open area. Teams were formed from neighborhoods or streets, and each of these would battle one another in baseball to see who would come out on top. Baseball and other sports gave people of that day a sense of belongingness during the war. A team united together to defeat the other team helped them feel continuity that hadn't been felt in a while because of the war, and also taught them techniques of working together towards a common goal. The children were practicing, whether they knew it or not, working together, which was a major theme in the United States that they needed in defeating the Axis powers. Radio was also popular during this time. Kids' radio was generally dramas or shows that we think as TV, but just the radio version. The radio shows for kids frequently carried the theme of good versus evil, where both would battle it out, and eventually good would come out on top. These shows helped teach a good lesson that the good guys should always win. Along with these shows were practical everyday lessons, such as planting victory gardens and buying war bonds. It was not propaganda, but rather a way to pass along to children what they should be ready to do in the future.
We can trace the roots of many modern leisure activities we participate in today to the 20s, Great Depression, and World War II era. The Heisman Trophy, for instance, was established during the Great Depression with the intent of recognizing the most valuable player in college football for the season. The Heisman Trophy presentation continues to this day and upholds its original intent of recognizing the player whose performance best exhibits the pursuit of excellence and integrity.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Tonight we're going to recognize the most outstanding player for college football season. Today I'd like to recognize Kellen Devlin, quarterback at NC State University. Yeah!
Wow. Always dreamt about having one of these things. First of all, I just want to thank my grandma. It was all for her. And my family. I wouldn't be able to do it for my family. And most importantly, my Savior, Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you. Rest in peace, Grandma.
Baseball continues to be a popular sport across the country, and fans can support their college or professional teams by attending in their leisure time. Speakeasies led to bars and the growth of nightlife, while prohibition led to NASCAR. As bootleggers outfitted their cars to outrun law enforcement, competition for fastest car began and NASCAR was born. NASCAR has a nationwide following today, and many Americans spend their leisure time watching NASCAR races. The popularity of movies in the 1920s continued throughout the 20th century, and due to the progression of technology, people can stream movies online or rent them from services such as Redbox. Children continue to play games as well. However, due to increased technology, video games have risen in popularity over cards and board games, and have produced a large market for leisure services. Lastly, radio continues to be a significant source of music and news today, especially in the car. Local radio stations gather a following of listeners, and similar to the 20s, Great Depression, and World War II time periods, remains a way for friends to spend time together and stay connected.